I know people are still coming in, but look, it's 13:01 and I need to get going. So, hello and welcome to the Pivot series. My name is Fiona O'Callaghan. I am the Operations Manager in RDI Hub and I am your host for today. In this session of the Pivot series, we will be hearing from Paidi O'Reilly, who is an Innovation Specialist, Adjunct Professor at UCC, Trainer and Facilitator. Now, I've already done the sound check with everyone, so all is good to go. So we're off. So today, Paidi will explore how you take an innovative idea and bring it to life. So for those of you who are new to the Pivot series, now is your opportunity to connect with a community of thought leaders exploring how you pivot, reinvent, and innovate your business and revenue model to survive and thrive. So the Pivot series is powered by RDI Hub, an environment for startups and corporates to learn and collaborate together to accelerate growth. So RDI Hub is a public-private partnership backed by Fexco, IT3 and Kerry County Council and funded through the EI REDF Fund based in Kerry. So these sessions are designed to be interactive. So I will have time at the end for questions, so please do get involved. And I am going to share my screen with everyone. And sorry now, I'm just so can't find it. Sorry now, everyone. Don't know what's going on here. So we will get going in 2 ticks as soon as I can find the Minty Cloud. So we're good to go. Thank God. Bit of a struggle there. Right. So this is Minty. So if everyone could browse to a new tab or just browse on your phone and go to minty.com and use the code 182879. You don't have to sign up for anything. You can just pop in the code and the first question will come up. So the first question is, what is the biggest blocker to starting a business? Now everyone, you have 1 to 3 options and it's just a word cloud that comes in. So I'll give everyone 2 to 3 minutes to answer the question and we'll see what we have coming in. So we have nothing yet. No one wants to be using the interact. It's an interactive session, everyone. We're supposed to be using the Minty Cloud. Perfect. Okay, capital. In a current job that pays, funding, skills, effort, fear, pipeline of business, assembling a team, market traction, funding runway, finance. Yeah, those are all really, really big. Belief in yourself, product market fit, tech knowledge, network, making the jump, cultural mindset. Yeah, those are like, okay, so 17 of you. Oh, there's more. Proof of idea, making the jump, experience, security, confidence, right skills. Yeah, like all those are valid, to be honest with you. If I was going out starting a business, all of those. So we have, it's jumping around so much. Market traction, yeah. Assembling a team, yeah. We had that marketable product, belief in yourself, making the jump, experience, money, business plan. Okay, so those are really interesting and completely valid as well. I'd be feeling the exact same, to be honest.
So very interesting as well, Fionnuala, that funding and finance have remained centre and biggest on that diagram, nearly from the very start.
Yeah, no, for sure, definitely. That is the biggest thing, because you might have an idea, but sure, how are you supposed to get it off the ground if you haven't got any funding, you know?
And interestingly then as well, some personal, I don't know, fear, security, experience, skills, you know, so a lot of very personal things as well, which we'll talk a bit about today. The network is important. So again, the importance of the likes of the RDI hub, you know, in terms of helping to build that network is probably in there as well as an important counterbalance to some of these.
Yeah, and there's more coming in now as well. So
confidence.
Yeah, confidence is a massive thing. I mean, you can have the idea, but you might be too scared to make the jump. You know, that's the thing. Willingness to take the risk. Yeah. Legal. Yeah. Time. That's a massive one. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question. So this will also pick up on anyone who is logged in. So at the top of the page on the button that says go to slide, you'll be able to resubmit answers, same format as before. So we'll see what kind of support is needed to find a great idea. Knowledge. Yeah, definitely. I had a pop at a few at the question. Now, yeah, the team. Yeah. I answered these now a few times myself actually. Just diversity, political, funding. Okay, network is a massive one. Business groups, marketing analysis, mentoring, big one. Technical team. Identifying need, diversity, ecosystem, group, research, early adapters, team sport, plan, time, identify need, market analysis. Yeah, these are really, really valid points, everyone. And mastermind, collaboration, diversity, questioning, a potential customer. Not going anywhere without a customer anyway. So imagination, money, industry knowledge, a community. Yeah, so network, team, and research and experience and funding and trust as well. Yeah, I actually had trust in my one as well. They seem to be more prominent than the rest of them.
So and it's very interesting for Nuala again, because funding was at the center of the last one in terms of barriers, but yet here I suppose the thing that's most needed is interesting. Experience was there for a long time at the center of it. Network is there now, you know. So it's interesting that again that connection to expertise, mentoring, and all it seems to be an important support.
Yeah, well, I suppose, you know, it's where to start, really, isn't it? And it's like, where do you go? And yeah, it's really hard, to be honest. And you know, you need to reach out to your network as well, just so you can validate the idea if it's even, you know, credible. You know. So on that note, I am going to stop sharing. So they were great answers, and look, it's interesting to see people's perspective on what they deem blockers and the sports they feel they need, you know. So I'm definitely intrigued to explore more. And on that note, I'm going to hand you over to Paidi. So he is a global lecturer with IMI and former director of innovation and research at Taxuna. And Paidi, you are now the host, so I am going to stop sharing.
Yeah, so I'll just switch over to a slide share here. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. I probably won't be keeping a very close eye on the chat, so I know if Nuala will be. So first, I suppose it's just to say thanks to the RDI Hub for the invite. I suppose an invite on a topic that's very close to my own heart, and probably on a topic that I've been involved in for a number of decades now. I think I was just counting this morning, going back maybe about 27 years at this stage. So I'll maybe give a bit of background about myself shortly, but first, just in terms of the topic, and I think it's maybe important just to put in context. We have maybe about a half hour, maybe a bit longer, so there's only so much we can do within the half hour. So I'll just give an idea of maybe of some of the things that we will talk about in that time. So I suppose the first question really is why innovation? And I suppose at face value, you'd wonder why anyone would ask that question, because we all assume that innovation is important. But I suppose when we go into organizations and we speak to people about innovation, you ask them what is innovation. Very often those organizations really struggle to explain what they mean by innovation and what they're asking you to do in asking you to come in. So I suppose that's a big problem, so that even though everyone is talking about it, very few of us know exactly what it is. Then on the other hand, I suppose there's a lot of, literature out there that explains the importance of innovation to organizations. And I suppose it's very easy to understand that organizations that don't innovate won't survive. Innovation are the future products, the future services, the future processes that really will carry companies into the future. Yet at the same time, most organizations struggle with innovation. Now, in a way, I suppose the two are related, that if we can't explain what it is, it's no surprise really that we struggle to manage it and to prosper with innovation. So I suppose in terms of what is it actually, there's lots of maybe different views on and different definitions. I suppose the easiest definition is really to remember that it's innovation is a systematic approach to creating value through change. So nice and simple, but it's a systematic approach. It's an approach that you can repeat over and over again. It's focused on creating value, and it does that through change. Now, I think when you break that down, value is only ever realized when it's consumed. So innovation, therefore, isn't just about creating ideas. It's about actually getting those ideas right through to implementation, right out maybe into market. So innovation goes from that, what we call the fuzzy front end of the ideation, right through to actually having products on shelves or maybe processes implemented. And that really, I suppose, differentiates then the difference between invention and innovation. Invention is the creative bit. It's maybe taking ideas and creating something that's perceived to be of value. But innovation goes further. It then takes those ideas, regardless of whether you create those ideas or not, and actually brings them to market or to implementation. Okay, so I think that's important because it really means that innovation is a team sport. It goes from everything from that creativity bit right through to the logistics of getting things delivered. And all of those elements are important. You don't have innovation without those elements. And in general, we may be strong at one part of that, but human nature being human nature and human capabilities being human capabilities, we're probably not strong at all of it. So we therefore need others around us. We need diversity around us to be able to carry that through. I suppose in terms of my own background, back too long ago to remember in a way, but back in the early 90s, I started my career as an engineer, a software engineer. I worked for first maybe 3-4 years with GEC in the UK, and probably for the next 20 odd years after that, really I went from one company to another, maybe from one sector to another, one industry to another, but really, I suppose, involved in innovation projects. Now, in some cases, those projects weren't called innovation projects. They might have been maybe systems development projects, or possibly, if you go back into the 90s, process re-engineering exercises, maybe product development projects, or even, I suppose, service transformation projects. Now, what was clear to me, whether you were talking about GC back in the early days, or maybe involved with startups more recently, is the way companies innovate can be very, very different to each other. And what works in one company doesn't necessarily work in another company. Now, that used to fascinate me, that what worked maybe with a GC just wouldn't work with, let's say, a startup. Now, let's say if you're in the digital space at the moment, startups, it's all about minimum viable products. And I know probably some of the companies here probably also innovate using minimum viable products. Now, the concept of minimum viable products is really about getting ideas out early, maybe even getting prototypes out into as minimum viable products into pilot sites or out into markets so that you can learn as quickly as possible. Now that works very well in some spaces. So we'd have used it, for example, in the education space and getting education apps out and getting them out early so you could learn as much as you can, as quickly as you can, and then improve the product as you go along. Now, you can't use that same approach, however, in other industries. For example, in GC, we're involved in projects that were designing blades for turbines, in some cases nuclear turbines. The last thing you could do is say, well, let's try out that new blade design by putting it in a nuclear turbine and see what happens. Okay, so what works in one space doesn't necessarily work in another space. And I suppose that intrigued me. I suppose I was also maybe a bit annoyed by some of the advice that was out there, some of the literature that was out there that you were reading about how to innovate, because it assumed that every company was different. So in 2007, I went back, did a PhD in the innovation management space. And really, it was about exploring how companies innovate. Now, what was, I suppose, clear from that research is that what worked, again, for one company didn't necessarily work for another company, but also there was no ideal way of innovating. Some companies adopted a very open style of innovation, open innovation. Others are very closed. Okay, some of the companies that adopted an open approach to innovation performed very well, but others performed very poorly. Okay, now I suppose the big lesson from that PhD for me was that we have to innovate the way we innovate in organizations. Okay, so the way we innovate has to be tailored to the organization that you're in. It has to be tailored maybe to its culture, its values, its vision, so on and so forth. Now you might say that was a lot of did that actually take 4 years to figure that out? But I suppose what I then did after that was actually trying to help companies in terms of the way they innovate and trying to innovate the way they innovate, change the way they innovate within organizations. I suppose I was very fortunate after the PhD. I'd worked in a number of research centers. In one case, we set up a new innovation center for a technology company, ran that for a number of years, but also at the same time, we were creating programs for innovators at a sort of middle and senior management level in organizations. We ran probably about 400 odd people through those programs in terms of mentorship, mentoring the way they were innovating within their companies. And I suppose, again, the insights from that have been really, really fascinating. You know, that I suppose one of the big lessons is that systems are important, processes are important, tools are important, okay, but they pale into insignificance when you talk about mindset. The most important determinant of the success of innovation, according to what we've seen in any organization, is down to the mindset that people adopt towards innovation in that company. Okay, so if you go into a company and they tend to maybe adopt that business as usual mindset and trying to bring it into an innovation space, you're wasting your time. Okay, even though you might have the systems, the innovation processes, tools, you're going to get very little traction from it. And maybe that's a bit of what the discussion here is about today. It's more about maybe changing that mindset. Which I think is critical to the way we innovate. So if I roll forward into, I suppose, into my more recent career, I wear a number of different hats. So one is, I suppose, an innovation mentor, assisting companies wherever possible with the way they innovate. Another hat I wear is I've been adjunct professor in Cork University Business School. A further hat is I'm program director of a number of programs in UCC IMI, Irish Management Institute, where we are actually, I suppose, teaching some of these techniques, these skills to middle and senior managers. So I'm going to move on here, but I think the focus today is really about that mindset, and I suppose clearing the way from ideation through to innovation, and maybe pointing out some of the blockers that can get in the way of that mapping or that journey from ideation to innovation. So hopefully we'll enjoy it, and I'll try and also keep an eye on the clock here. Okay, so I suppose innovation in established companies is very interesting. Sometimes we use the metaphor maybe of water, and water is interesting in terms of you can shift or it can shift through phases. So it can go from liquid to steam, it can go from liquid to solid, and generally it behaves very differently in each of those states. Now, organizations, and I suppose, are similar. The more established an organization becomes, it literally shifts phase from maybe something very agile, very unstructured, ultimately to something like ice, very structured. And essentially what happens is it freezes I suppose, a way of working into the fabric of the organization. It freezes around an architecture. So that architecture could be, I suppose, soft elements. It could be about a way we lead, the way we manage. It can be harder elements like processes, procedures, buildings, etc. Now, the difference between organizations and water, it's fairly easy to get water with the, I suppose, applying energy, heat to it, to go from ice back up to liquid and even up to vapor. However, research shows that it's incredibly difficult to unfreeze an organization once it catches onto that particular approach to working. It's very hard to shift it from a particular vision. It's very difficult to shift it from a particular view into a market, into a particular way of delivering value, maybe through particular products, services, through particular resources may have, and maybe through certain activities. And that's a major challenge for people in organizations, is to, I suppose, create these ambidextrous organizations that are operationally excellent, but also can innovate at the same time. Now, the good news is for others, outsiders, that creates opportunities, because essentially it means that the more successful an organization is, very often the more difficult it finds it to shift, because that model of success is hard-coded into the DNA of the organization. And again, we all maybe can recall examples, you know, an example of companies that fell foul of this. I remember when I started out maybe in the IT space with companies like Wang, Nixdorf, DEC, they're all gone. You know, they were unable to adjust. A more recent example maybe is Kodak. Again, you know, knew what was coming, had all the technologies in its own labs, you know, but just couldn't shift away from that previous DNA of success. But as I say, this creates opportunities then for startups to come in and take advantage of the spaces that these organizations can't really, I suppose, operate in. Sometimes these companies see opportunities as too small or too difficult, and they're really ripe then for entrepreneurs to come in and take advantage of them. In some cases, those entrepreneurs come from those very companies. So an example might be Xerox PARC, where a lot of the ideas that came through PARC at the time ended up maybe in products developed by Apple, Microsoft. Companies like, was it Adobe, spun out from PARC. So what people in the company or in Xerox at the time could see was these opportunities, but they knew the organization itself wasn't able to take advantage of them. So they brought the ideas, the knowledge out and innovated outside, sometimes by giving some equity back to Xerox, but not in all cases. Okay, so when we again go into our organizations, very often what we do is ask them to look at their current setup and using what we call here the innovation grid, is score the organization against each of these cells. But we ask them to score from the point of view of innovation. So for example, to what extent does your vision, the vision of this organization, contribute to innovation and an innovative approach in the organization? Or maybe another one, to what extent does current management promote and add to innovation within the organization? Now, when you get organizations and people within organizations to do this, we can see that very successful organizations, where obviously these elements contribute to that success, when you get them to score it from the perspective of innovation, very often they start to score low or lower. So organizations that are very successful in terms of what we call the operational engine, the way they do things, very often struggle in terms of the innovation engine, where those same elements actually, I suppose, create issues for innovation. Now, there's, I suppose, lots of different views in terms of how you tackle that. Some of us try and maybe have an organization within an organization. We have innovation maybe as an entity within a larger organization, where we try and nurture maybe different elements within that internal organization, maybe a different style of leadership, a different management approach, different set of KPIs, so on and so forth. But it's incredibly difficult, because people walk in the morning in the one door, and next thing you're asking them to behave very differently when they're in maybe a certain part of the building and operating through this innovation engine, to how they operate in the other part. And humans find that very difficult to switch on and off. When am I business as usual and when am I innovation? And what's the difference between those mindsets? Other organizations go a very different route. They try and get maybe the ideas out of the building as quickly as possible, maybe into a neighboring building. So I know maybe in Dublin, the likes of the innovation centres and the RDI hub very often is a home for those teams and those ideas. We get them out of the existing building into maybe these centres where people can, I suppose, operate under a very different environment. Other companies develop what they call skunk works, which are completely standalone early entities where companies can, or people can develop ideas. Or other companies, again, just acquire startups, and they bring ideas in that way. Okay, so we're into really the meat of it here, in terms of, and it's only one element. There's lots of things we can talk about in terms of that journey from ideation to innovation, but I just want to point out maybe one or two of the issues and the blockers when it comes to that journey. Okay, one is surprising enough, I suppose, the innovation leader. So the innovation leader maybe in businesses, and whether they are what we call multipliers or diminishers. Now, innovation is a team sport, so ideally what we need to do is get groups of people to work together where the sum of the parts is greater than the individual parts. And I suppose an innovation leader needs to try and ensure they're multiplying, adding to the, I suppose, the capabilities of the individual rather than taking away from them. But sometimes inadvertently, and I'm as much guilty of this as anyone else, we fall into, I suppose, traps where I suppose the role we adopt towards innovation actually has the opposite effect to what we intended. One is the innovation hero, okay, where I suppose we are maybe the ideas guy or girl, so all the ideas come through us. We're incredibly respected, and whenever someone talks about innovation, they come to us or they come to this innovation hero. But it then becomes more about an individual than the team, which is an issue. The person nearly becomes a blocker to the very thing they're achieving. Okay, other people start to switch off to say, well, that if they're in awe, maybe these innovation heroes, they're saying, well, if we need to innovate, we go through whoever it is. Another one, very, very different style of leadership is what we call the innovation commander. Very often not an innovation hero, not an ideas person, but what they do is bring in a process. They're very process driven. Okay, so they maybe bring in a process of innovation into the organization, but again, it can be an issue because it becomes less about the team and it becomes more about the process in this case. Another, I suppose, issue is maybe the innovation rapid responder. So again, I'm sure we've met a lot of these in our organizations where there's any hint of innovation or creative, and they're in, they grab it, they grab these projects and they pull them back into their own layer. Okay, and in the end, again, people start to switch off because these projects are being grabbed. You know, they're being dominated maybe by one individual or a smaller group. Okay, and people just switch off and let them at it. Another, failing can come from the innovation evangelist. You know, this person where innovation is everything for them. No matter what's happening in the organization, it's about innovation, and maybe over-promising innovation. Maybe, again, not recognizing how difficult it is for people to innovate, and not maybe, I suppose, recognizing the effort that people have to put into innovation in the organization. And again, that can close people down, you know, in terms of their involvement. The last one, and probably don't have to say much about, is the perfectionist. Innovation can't be about perfection. Innovation is about trying things. It's about learning, very often learning by things not working. So again, a perfectionist is too slow getting ideas out there. If you're slow getting ideas out there, then you're essentially closing down the opportunities to learn. Okay, so again, as I said, these are ones that I find myself guilty of at times, but they can be big issues for companies. You know, ideally, our innovation leader should be none of these. You know, the innovation leader should be something different. I really like this, and maybe it's where I draw maybe some of the inspiration for these slides from. It's a book by Liz Wiseman. You know, it's called Multipliers, and it's really talking about these individuals in companies, and some of them really add, and sometimes inadvertently or accidentally detract or diminish the capabilities of their teams. And sometimes, again, it's accidental, as I say, they tend to be very visionary, but they're too far maybe out in front of people, you know, or it could be they're too fast, they're too creative, you know, and people just can't catch up with them. So I think, again, we have to safeguard against those. And if you really want to nurture innovation in organizations, again, largely based on the likes of the PhD research by Wiseman, maybe our own experience with 400 or 500 individuals gone through our programs, maybe going back into my own experience, what you need is an innovation facilitator. Okay, now the innovation facilitator realizes very early that they themselves do not have the answers. In fact, they probably realize that no individual has the answers. But what you have to do is create an environment for people to be able to explore, looking for answers. Okay, and I think one of the models here is what we call the AMO model. You know, it's about, I suppose, nurturing people's abilities, and every individual has different abilities. It's about providing the motivation for them to want to innovate. And those rewards could be intrinsic or extrinsic. And in fact, funny enough, with innovation, in most cases, we see it's intrinsic. It's not finance. It's not more salary. It's actually rewards and recognition. Very often are the most important thing when it comes to motivating innovation, and then creating the opportunities, the space for people to innovate within. And it's that and those, the combination of those elements really is what gives us innovation performance. So I don't want people to think maybe the innovation facilitator is this very soft person. If anything, they're the opposite. They tend to have a harder edge. They're demanding, you know, they challenge people, but they also empower them. They constrain them, saying they'll only give so much budget or so much time, you know, but they hold them accountable and never rescue them. Okay, now the don't rescue bit is important, because again, if you keep on rescuing, you're seen nearly as the innovation hero, or the you know, the innovation first responder. And the more you rescue, the more others will start pulling back, saying, sure, look, even if we don't get it right, or if we don't innovate, sure, X, Y, and Z will come in and rescue us. I suppose the other important thing is for facilitating innovation, it's about asking questions and letting people hunt for answers. So again, we limit the number of questions we ask. Don't be the ideas guy or girl. Avoid heroes. Be very careful of heroes on your team, because essentially they can become the bottleneck. And start to identify the unique capabilities in individuals. So there's, I suppose, and I'm just keeping an eye again on the clock here. So I suppose there's this idea again, especially in the startup space. All I need is one idea, the perfect idea, and yet there's no perfect idea. Okay, we know with successful businesses, whether that's innovation within established businesses or it's the creation of new business through entrepreneurship, is the first idea is never the last idea, it's never the best idea. Okay, the best way of getting a good idea is getting many ideas. And again, nurturing, I suppose, that approach to allowing ideas flourish. And there's a saying, that real innovation comes from allowing ideas have sex. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that online, but it's probably before the 6 o'clock watershed, but hopefully there's no children watching. But it's this idea that ideas on their own are maybe they've some inherent value, but it's really when you allow ideas collide and ideas from lots of different people, lots of diversity, then you start to see value. Now, this rolls back a bit, good ideas always start with good questions. In fact, I think the unit that we should be working on in innovation is not ideas at all, it's questions. Okay, so maybe an example would be with ideas, very often we hard code the problem and the solution into the idea. So we say, and I'm struggling here to think of an example, but maybe that we what we need here is a good bridge. I'm looking at the River Lee here down to my right. We need a good bridge. Now we could put all our efforts into designing, building that perfect bridge. On the other hand, if we use techniques like the 5 whys, and we start asking ourselves, well, why do we need a new bridge? The answer may be something like, well, why we need a bridge here is to get products from maybe one side of Cork to maybe the main market, which is over on the other side of the river. Now, once you then look at that and convert it into what we call the magic question in design. So what is the magic question? It's a how might we question. Okay, so we're going from an idea, which was to build a bridge, to realization what we need to do is get products from one side to the city to the main market on the other side. We now convert that into a how might we question, which is how might we build a more effective way of getting products to a certain location. Now, once we do that, we see lots of more opportunities for innovation, where a bridge is not the only solution. Maybe a submarine is an option. Maybe a ship is an option. Maybe an airplane is an option. So again, the key for me in innovation isn't the ideas, because sometimes we hard bake problems and solutions, and it's the questions we ask. Now, the answers to those questions are never and we should never assume they're in our own head. We need to get over this expert mindset that we are the expert, we have the answers. When it comes to innovation, again, like we said, you're a facilitator of a process. The experts are always the people that are direct stakeholders in the question you're asking. So in this case, the answer to my question, how might we get products from here to the other side of the river, I might say, well, the experts really in this space may be the people that would demand that service. So it could be businesses. It could be customers who would be customers of those businesses. It could be lots of others. The answers are not in your head, it's in their heads. and value depends on their view of the answers to those questions. So again, is it Steve Blank says, you know, that he uses the acronym GOOB. We need to get out of the building. We need to knock on as many doors as we can, get into people's heads, see what they're seeing, hear what they're hearing, to know, feel what they're feeling. And I suppose innovation comes from that. And I suppose just to maybe start to wrap it up is, interestingly, with what's called an entrepreneurial or an innovation mind, it works very different sometimes to what we understand it to be. Okay, and a very quick example, there's 2 ways of baking a cake. One is I come up with this idea of a perfect cake. And what I then do is go out and try and find all the ingredients, maybe all the utensils and everything else I need to bake that cake. The alternative is I go into the kitchen here and I see what ingredients are available and I try and bake the best possible cake with those ingredients. Now, very interestingly, Sara Sarasvati, who researched with Herbert Simon, sort of a Nobel laureate in this space, trying to understand entrepreneurial minds, found that most successful entrepreneurs are the latter. They make do with what they have. Okay, so they tend to feel empowered. You know, and we call that the pilot in the plane principle. They feel they can make a difference, that they have the capabilities. Okay, the second thing, I suppose it's a bird in the hand. They're very much aware of what resources they have and what they can do with those resources. Third thing is they know what affordable loss they're willing to do. So they're not big betters. There is this view that entrepreneurs are big betters. They're not. The most successful ones always cover their back. Okay, another one is what we call the crazy quilt thing, where entrepreneurs know that the way they can get further is by building these networks and getting other people to come in, share resources. And the last one, the lemonade principle, we call it, is where happy, I suppose, exceptions, happy outcomes occur very often when you don't expect them. You know, so sometimes inadvertently or serendipitously things happen, and sometimes they're the biggest indicator of a pivot or the need for a pivot to a more successful outcome. And this is really where I want to maybe finish a bit more on a high than telling us all the problems, the way we innovate and problems with entrepreneurship, is it's never too late to innovate. In fact, again, contrary to most of the evidence and most of the stuff you hear out there, you know, the anecdotal evidence is that the most successful innovators are 45 in terms of an average age, 45 years of age. And we can see that in, I suppose, in terms of the graphs in the middle and the right, but also your chances of success increase the older you get. The more experiences, life experiences you have, up to, I think, 80 years of age or 60 odd years of age, contribute to the chances of your success. So it's never too late to be entrepreneurial, to be innovative. In fact, probably the older we get, there's an argument say that we actually get better at it. And just to finish off, I suppose when we work with companies, we now very often when you go into companies, say we need to shift our culture. You know, we need to create a more innovative culture. I know what we say is culture change only comes after you shift behaviors. You know, you get people to start acting differently, but you only shift behaviors after you shift people's skills, giving them the means to change their behaviors. But you only shift people's skills if you shift their mind and the way they think. So invariably, when we're working, let's say, through the programs we deliver, what we really start with is mind shift, then we go to skill shift, then we go to behavior shift, and it's only then culture shift can happen. Now, you can do this in smaller areas of the business, but again, you have to nearly go through those levels. So again, I know I've been talking to the guys in the RDI Hub, and I suppose we were hoping that some of these events and some of the workshops would happen face-to-face. Unfortunately, with COVID, that's unlikely to happen maybe in the short term, but maybe there's an opportunity for doing virtual stuff. But what I said to Liam was that if people are interested in learning a bit more, that I would still give my time back to the RDI Hub, where maybe the first 5 or 10 people from the call here that go to Liam saying, look, we would like to have maybe some time with Paidi and with the RDI Hub, then I'm willing to give at least a day of my time to that. So first 5 or 10 people that maybe email Liam and his email there, I'm more than happy maybe to engage with people through online means. But as I say, unfortunately, it would be a lot more fun if we did it, if we had done it face to face. Okay, so I think that's me done. So I think I'm probably handing it back to Fionnuala here, or Fionnuala's take it back.
Yeah, so I've already reclaimed it.
No messing.
Yeah, so do you want to stop sharing your screen there, Paidi, and I will get up some questions. Right, perfect. So that was actually really interesting. You know, innovate the way you innovate. I logged that because I suppose that's not really something that you think about, that you have to innovate the way you innovate to suit the situation or maybe the environment you're in, or even the culture that you have, you know. So that, I've thought that was very interesting. But look, I'm going to crack on with the questions now, because we're going to be running out of time soon. So the first question from Anastasia is there a way to train the mindset to become more innovative as a leader?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And so for the first thing, I think is you have to get people to accept that they think in a certain way. And I suppose it's to get people to think about the way they think. And sometimes we call that metacognition. And I suppose what you can do is I suppose, present to people that, first of all, humans generally are flawed when it comes to decisions anyway. You know, we tend to narrow in on problems and solutions so quickly, and then we've confirmatory bias. We only listen to people that will confirm we made the right decision. And you know, we've overconfidence in our decision. So I think sometimes you have to bring people through those I suppose realizations, and then maybe point out and let people point out whether they have those characteristics of a growth or a fixed mindset. You know, so a growth mindset ideally is where you're trying to get people to see challenges as opportunities for learning, and I suppose a willingness to put themselves out there so that they can innovate, but also learn and develop their own careers through innovation. So I think there are ways of doing it. Now, I know I've spoken a bit about this before. Sometimes different people, I suppose, go on that journey in different ways. Sometimes you can explain it to people and they'll start to embrace it. Others, you have to nearly go the opposite. You have to get them to use the tools, and then slowly they start to think differently. So sometimes you can get people to think differently and then they behave differently. In some cases, you get people to behave differently so that they'll then start to think differently. So it depends on the individuals and the teams, really, how you go about it.
Okay. Okay, so we have another one, which is, how important are mentorship programs to help going from ideation to innovation?
Okay, so first of all, I'd say, like, I'm a great believer in people's own capabilities. You know, I think we all have, in fact, if I go into organizations, the problem is never a lack of creativity. It's other things. It's never an issue of creativity. Very often, the problem is the execution. You know, it's bringing an idea forward. And unfortunately, in some organizations, you know, we've come up with ideas in the past and we feel we got nowhere with them, and we don't get any feedback when we submit them, maybe through tournaments or hackathons or whatever else, and people switch off. You know, so I think the biggest issue in organizations is what we call an innovation fatigue. People have tried it. You know, they've tried to be creative, they've tried to be innovative, and they feel they got nowhere in their organization, and they switch off. So I think that's inherently in us, but sometimes we've lost it. You know, my kids are a bit older here, but I remember kids when they started school. You know, there was nothing wrong with a pink cat. You know, but then when they got a bit older, it had to be a black cat or a brown cat. You know, and I think sometimes with innovation, you have to maybe encourage people to refine the pink cat you know, but it's in there. I think the biggest issue is mentorship around the execution, you know.
Okay.
And also remember, you don't have to have the idea yourself. You have the question. The ideas come from going out there and actually sometimes asking someone. Let's say you've an interest in a certain area, maybe, I don't know, nursing homes. Well, actually go out there and ask them, you know, if you were to innovate or if you were to solve any problem in your organization, what would be the biggest one that you'd go after first? It's they will come up with the ideas for you. You don't need them.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. We've loads of questions coming in actually. So from Dina, if you have the idea and do not have the technical knowledge, where should one go to get support?
Yeah, so like I probably answer this coming from the technical side, and sometimes the faraway, you know, fields are always greener. You know, I know as the biggest issue with technologists is they don't have the business knowledge, and sometimes the people on the business side think the biggest issue is the technology side. So, but remember again, innovation really is a team sport. You may not have the technology side, but you identify what you do have. And I know VCs, for example, VCs assume that the idea you come in with, pitch them, will not be the idea that goes to market. Okay, but what they do invest in is the team, the people you have with us. So even if you don't have revenue at the moment, you can start to accumulate that team. You know, I know there's been some not great news maybe in Kerry in the last while in Killorglin, but there's people with incredible expertise, you know, that have worked in very well-respected companies. Imagine putting some of those together as a team. That's
and we
powerful.
have a pool of expertise as well ourselves, where you could gain knowledge from RDI Hub. So that might give you a bit of help there.
And I think with the RDI Hub, like it is a hub, which is great. It'll bring people together. It's about bringing people together into networks and identifying people that can help you with those networks. So focus nearly as much on establishing the team as getting the idea right, because I think the idea will come from the team. A good team will always outperform a good idea.
Yeah, that's great. So okay, so how important would you say a common understanding of why we need to innovate or why we are innovating in the context of a particular project? Is why an effective way of getting the team to rally behind the innovation cause, creating that sense of purpose, etc.?
Yeah, so now hopefully I understood it correctly. So I think so if we're doing ideation sessions, and I hate the term brainstorming ideation because I think it's about questions rather than ideas, but let's say we are doing it. The most important thing you start with is some sort of vision for what you're trying to do. Okay, because otherwise brainstorming purpose, exactly. Otherwise brainstorming ideas, it goes everywhere and nowhere. You know, yet if you have a sense of a purpose that you want to change something about this world, or you want to change something about maybe the customer's experience or whatever it is, I think even starting with that then is the vision or the purpose that really gets creativity going. There's this great saying actually, which is it's Tim Herzon, I think, came up with it. It's called, now I'm from Cork, and so THs don't come easily. It's the third. So the real innovation comes from when you push through the barrier. It's not those first ideas are the valuable ones. It's not even the second batch. It's the ones where you allow the ideas collide. And that's called the third. Getting to the third is the most important thing.
Okay, so I have another one. How do you design a client interview to test your value proposition?
Okay, so again, there's many ways of doing it. I'm interested in the word interview because I'm not sure it should be an interview. So I know there's tools you can use. There's the value proposition canvas by Alex Osterwelder, and I know I see maybe one or two of my colleagues online here that I know run sort of workshops in the use of it, where it allows you sort of to try and come up with a value proposition that really can deliver value to a certain customer segment. However, I tend to go a bit different. Very often what we do is we will get someone to design a hypothetical maybe brochure or a box for a product even before you've developed that idea, and you go out with that brochure or with the box and say, what's your take on this? So the idea of the one page, let's say brochure or leaflet or the box, you know, is that it forces you into trying to say what you need to say as an innovator in a very small piece of landscape, you know. And what you're doing is trying to determine people's reaction to that, how it resonates with them. So hypothetically, what we say is, if you went into a supermarket and you go down that cereal aisle, why would someone pick your box and not all the other ones? So same here, if you put your leaflet or the box you'd use to, I suppose, to represent the product, why would they want to pick yours, not others? So there's loads of techniques we use. They're just maybe a few of the examples, Fionnuala.
Okay, so I have something here from Owen O'Hanlon, and I just want to read it out anyway. We're getting really stuck for time, everyone. So I don't care what the slides say, Paidi. You are truly the superhero, Mr. Innovator, and always there for folks like me doing the hard yards inside organizations. So that was nice.
Yeah, see, you don't know, I could have paid Owen. Yeah. No, so again, I appreciate Owen. I know we've done work, and Owen was maybe one of those individuals that would have come through. Actually, I think it was 2 of our programs. So thanks again.
Okay, so I'll do one more question, and then I must finish up. So the next question is, how would companies or employers empower and encourage innovation? For example, creating an award or recognition system.
Yeah, so hopefully some of the slides maybe spoke a bit about that. I think, again, you do it in different ways in different organizations. I think you called out there as well, Fionnuala, like the way we innovate in one organization is just so different to another. So let's say the way we innovate maybe in an engineering company, which tends to be very process driven traditionally, may need to be very different to maybe a digital startup. So there's no real answer, but I think the key thing is really, you know, that AMO model nearly, you know, it's about, I suppose, recognizing people's abilities, creating diverse teams around those abilities. It's creating incentives. Very often the incentives are not financial. It's actually just giving people a recognition and an out for their ideas. They just want, they're innovative, they're creative, they want an outlet to be able to express that and get some recognition. Even if it fails, if it doesn't go anywhere, it's still important to recognize these efforts, because the next one will succeed. So I think it's, in some cases, it's really simple stuff makes a very big difference. Sometimes it's not these big systems, big processes, big tools make the difference at all. Sometimes it's very simple stuff.
Yeah, completely agreed. I mean, most of the time people just want to be told they're doing a good job, you know. So, okay, look, we're officially out of time, unfortunately, and I know there's a lot more questions. So I'd just like to thank you, Paidi, for your insight. It was a great conversation, and you know, we're really lucky to be able to work with you, and just really grateful that you shared your time and your expertise with us today. So just an end note, if you are a tech firm looking for a safe space for your team where you get to join a community of pacemakers and disruptors, get in touch with me. I am going to put my email in the chat. So you can get in touch with me. The RDI Hub is a community of pacemakers, high potential startups and corporates, and you could also belong to that too. So next week, we are going to have John Reardon from Shopify. So he's going to join us the same day, same time, Thursday, June 18th. And John is going to be looking at some of the future of work trends, impact of borderless future in the long and short term, the hybrid model of work and what this means for the Irish town, sociological impact of hybrid model on community wellness and hobbies, and the actionable framework for creating a good remote work experience, and how Shopify are doing it well. So the social post will go up shortly, and be sure to register. This webinar will also be available to rewatch for anyone who registered. So thanks everyone for joining, and mostly thank you, Paidi, and it was great questions, really interactive. So thanks everyone, have a great day.
Thanks guys, take care.
Bye.